Welcome to the Shortway Show. So happy to have you with me this evening, a little bit past 7 p.m. on the East Coast. And guess what? I have a very interesting, I think, topic this evening. I say that every evening, don't I? Well, because every evening I do. That's why I keep saying that. Yes. But I talk constantly about community. You hear me talk about it. I yap about it. I say, community this, community that, community other thing, because it matters. I think it really does. So I brought tonight on someone who I hope is going to give us some insight, some of the pitfalls and some of the hopefully success stories and ways we can navigate some of this stuff in our own communities to create actual solutions within our community. He is the executive director for the at the Institute for Community Solutions, Dan Johnson. How are you, sir?
I am doing fantastic. And yourself, Larry?
I'm doing great. I'm glad you actually were able to give me some time this evening. Look, I complain constantly about community not doing what it's supposed to do, but usually what I will do is I blame government, right? I say government's the problem. As you add more government, you by default remove community. But you're saying that maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe there's a way that we can get around this. Am I right?
So let's start a little bit by defining community solutions. Because people talk about community all the time. And usually what they're talking about is at the core of what what makes a community solution different from government and from business. So government, the solutions are force, essentially. If you need to go take down a bad guy, if you need to go defend yourself, if you need whatever you need to do, you send government in, they use force. That's what they're good at. That's what they were formed to do, right?
It's true. Yes. You're not
business,
wrong.
Their driving motive is profit. So they're constantly looking to make a profit in a way that they offer a product or a service, and then you buy it, and then they get a profit. They're measured by their profit. They look at their profit. Governments are measured by the safety of their citizens. Businesses are measured by, safety of their citizens to some extent. They've gone into other areas, but we'll get into that, right?
Right.
Businesses are measured by their profit. Community, on the other hand, when people think of community, they do at least have the core right, which is community is driven by compassion.
Ooh, I like that.
Whenever someone says, I want a community solution to this, what they're imagining is, I want a compassionate solution. I want something that cares about the individuals who are facing this problem, or that cares about solving this problem for the people in this area, or what have you. They're talking about compassion. But compassion alone.
Touch this for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
The thing that I say often is when someone has a problem, whatever that problem is, financial problem, medical problem, mental problem, addiction problem, family problem, whatever, the first thing they need is someone who cares. Because when you have that, now you can figure out, okay, what's the next step? What do I actually need to fix my problem? But the first thing I need is somebody who cares, who can go, yeah, okay, you got this problem. Okay, let's talk about this and find the answer. Sadly, most of us think what we need is a program, which is checkbox.
Right.
So you're saying kind of the same thing, but you said it better than me because you said compassion. I like that. Yours is better. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I guess I was kind of saying you're right. So keep going, please.
No, it's absolutely true. So at the core of what makes community different, and when we think about all the different ways we help people, the government is a group of people that is focused on governing or ruling. The business sector, free market, is a group of people that are focused on selling products and services. Community is the third sector. Now, it's not talked about that way. We have like public and private sector, right? Everybody goes public sector, private sector, public sector, private sector. And that's cool. And both of those areas have certain things they're very good at as a sector at solving. But what neither of them are very good at is problems that you don't need someone who's really good with a stick. And the people who need help don't have the money to pay someone to do it. In that instance, which I would argue describes the vast majority of problems that we face in society today. If you think about the homelessness issue, what is it?
Yep.
It's people who don't benefit from a stick. and people who don't have the money to pay for the solution. If you want to buy, it used to be this pre-COVID, if you wanted to buy a house, you might have been able to, but
Right.
more and more of us are ending up in the homeless and or one bedroom apartment category. But
Right.
before COVID, at least, if you wanted to get a house and you had the financial means to do so, you could. But if you don't have the financial means, you can't. And you think about the healthcare crisis in this country. The healthcare crisis in this country is a crisis of cost. It is, I cannot afford
Oh, got it.
that is available. And all these government has this stopgap solution of, Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act and the healthcare marketplace. And businesses have, the urgent care and primary care solutions, and those are great. But if you look at the majority of problems, not everyone, but the majority of problems in this country, I would argue they're problems that the public and private sector are not good at solving. And that's why they persist. In the past 10 years,
Well, hold on. I want to cover this piece too, right? When you hear anyone talk about a golden age of medicine, if you hear anyone talk about that, it's always the idea of the community doctor, right? Exactly what you're just saying. You talk about the idea of healthcare. Most of us think, well, I need a big hospital in my backyard, right? But in reality, most people don't need a big hospital in their backyard. It's rare you need to go to a hospital. That's not what most need a doctor, right? Just a doctor who can say, no, this is a problem. Do this, do that. Here's a shot, right? Because you got infected or something, all right? Like, here's a prescription because you got a problem, whatever. Most people need just a local doctor who actually will talk to you, right? And I'll go one step further. The private market in this case does provide it, but only if you got cash. This goes to your other part, right? I don't have the cash to do it. But if you've got cash, you can get a doctor to see you anytime you want. You can get one to talk to you for as long as you want, ask you all the good questions. So yes, this is a problem where people the stick doesn't work, to your point, and they don't have the cash.
Right, exactly. And community solutions are set up specifically to address these issues that these people have. You look at the failure of government, state, local, and federal programs to tackle homelessness over the past 10 years. The homelessness rate in the United States has really not changed over the past 10 years. These programs have spent over $1 trillion tackling the homelessness issue. And
Terrible.
it really hasn't changed because you cannot beat homeless people with a stick to get them to not be homeless. It just doesn't work.
Right.
And in some cases, the private market tries to address the healthcare dilemma, but they're fundamentally unable to address if you don't have the cash.
So let me touch this too. I mean, you're hitting a lot of stuff. And I like this conversation because I brought this up in multiple different shows, but kind of not all together in this one. Now, what I brought up here was community. I want to bring up here in this case, community here is veterans, right? There's a successful kind of homeless program for veterans here in New York. They actually build out a building and veterans can go there. They're never thrown out. They pay 1/3 of their income. Whatever their income is 1/3, right? That's all it is. And that all they do to go there, you have to have two things. Have a DD-214, which for those who don't know is the honorable discharge sheet that you get when you get out of the military. It's called DD-214, shows you did serve. You have one of those. Okay, I'm a veteran. I got that. And two, I will tell you how much money I'm making. That's it. Do those two things, you can go there. Now, they give you services if you're in trouble. They give you services if you have PTSD, addiction problem. The services are there for you to help you out. Now, what happens is, and this solution, this is great, it's a nonprofit, to your point. It's a community service nonprofit that does this, right? They take donations too. I worked for them for free. I did training for them for free. They asked me to show up. I showed up in the middle of the night. I didn't care. It's in the Bronx back when I was where I used to live, right? I went back to the Bronx, showed up for free whenever they wanted, did it, 100%, never complained, happily did it. And what would happen is, at one point, the one-bedroom apartment you have in the Bronx is not worth how much money you're making. So at one point, you self-select and you leave. You just go, I'm not going to pay $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom in the Bronx. I'm not doing it, right? At one point, you stop. So you self-select. You don't get thrown out. You self-select. But what happened is many of them would stay longer on purpose and pay the extra because of that community. They wanted to help their fellow brothers and sisters who, this is only for male. This is only male only dormitory. So only males.
Yeah.
They wanted to help their own brothers. They wanted to help their brothers who were in trouble, so they would stay. They'd have jobs and be spending crazy money for the Bronx because they didn't want to leave. But eventually they would leave anyway. But I mean, that happened, right? So I'm yapping away because I spoke about this in the past. You're literally bringing up, and this is an example that actually worked.
Well, and let's touch on that, right? So if we look at one of the number one problems in the United States today is division. We have
Yes.
some of the worst political division we've had since the Civil War. If you look at pretty much any statistic or any poll. And what's at the root cause of that division? It's the fact that we have one thing that we're fighting over to try and solve our problems: government.
Right.
National government in particular, the federal government in particular, that's very far away, that doesn't know all the ins and outs or the individualities or the circumstances that we're going for. And so it becomes, well, I take over the help engine or you take over the help engine, but one of us has
Right.
got to run the help engine. Well,
Right.
look, there are 800,000 organizations that are service organizations in this country that are their
Wow.
own help engines. And in each of these organizations, one of the organizations, there's a food rescue organization in Florida. We just did the numbers recently because, as my day job, I'm a consultant for nonprofits. So we just did the numbers and found that this tiny nonprofit that's bringing in only $100,000 in a year, they are serving 15,000 of the food insecure people in Pinellas County. That's 15% of the food insecure people in Pinellas
Wow.
County are getting their food from this organization. And
Wow.
the dedication that their volunteers have to this organization, to that kind of sense of community, that sense of unity that we're wanting in this country, it's there in the nonprofits. It's there in the community organizations. That whole kumbaya, we're working on this together. Go to the community organizations, see it in action, see how many people dedicate hours and hours of their time in the middle of the night even to
Yep.
help their fellow man. That's what put us on top as a species, if you will, is we were willing to help each other.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. 100%.
And so what's missing that everybody needs is that community, is
Yeah.
that actually going out and helping one another. Instead, what we have right now is we've gotten lazy on some level because we've let this Leviathan that is the biggest entity we could think of, the government, and we're like, you're so good at hitting people with a stick. Why don't you give people apples?
Right. Right.
And what
Right.
drives me insane is this is not just theory. This is not
Hold
me
on,
saying,
I'm so
wow, the
gonna quote you
government.
on that. You're so good at hitting people with a stick. Why don't you give people apples? Quote Dan Johnson.
That's
Perfect.
fine. That's
That's
fine.
perfect. I love that. Yes.
If there's anything humans are better at than coming up with solutions, it's using the wrong ones. But
There you go. Yes.
but this isn't theory. This isn't me just coming on, you're very libertarian. And I'm a libertarian. This is me coming on saying, libertarian audience bashing the government. This is me coming on and saying that we have organizations like you just mentioned, the Veterans Organization or the Food Rescue Organization that I just mentioned, 800,000 of them all throughout the country, that 72 million Americans dedicate their time to every single year. If you look,
Wow.
that is about like 2/3 the size of the private workforce.
Wow.
That about 10%, I think it's 10% or so of our nation's GDP goes to these organizations. And you won't hear when CNN says, hey, there's this problem, or Fox says, hey, there's this problem. How do we solve it? They bring on federal official from HUD and federal official from FEMA,
Right.
and this, that, and the other. And they're always getting all the airtime. And yet the real solutions are in the Cajun navies. And the real solutions are in the steps to recovery homes. And the real solutions are in these communities. And they're not getting the airplay. They're not getting the time of day. They're not included in the discussion. And what I want to really push is, look, not every problem can be solved by community. There's certainly some
Sure.
problems, such as we were just looking into criminal justice, community solutions to justice recently. And some of the limitations of those are they're not going to really help all that much with cases where people actually want to go after each other.
Right.
So you have a case where people are very adversarial. We have the justice system to prevent family feuds from developing.
Right.
Okay. Community is not really good where you need a stick and they have apples, right?
Right.
On the other way. But if you look at the problems we're fighting about right now in this country, they're problems of apples and not sticks.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I
most of
just
them
want
are, I agree.
people Well, I just want people who are listening to this to think. You keep saying public and private sector. You keep saying government versus the free market. And you keep ignoring this solution over here that from the very get-go has been designed to tackle these problems. And if it were actually in the conversation, might be able to.
I want to go one step further in this. When you brought up the CNN and the Fox, they're bringing on people who ostensibly are experts, right? Because I've been a bureaucrat at HUD for 15 years, and so I'm an expert. But in reality, they're not at all. The expert are the people who are on the ground. Those are the real experts, right? And the example I'll give, the two, most of my nonprofit work has been with veterans. That's been the people who I've chosen to help. Not that anyone's better or worse, but I'm a veteran. I know them. I get along with them. So those are the people I tend to help more than others. And because I know them very well. And this is my example of that. In that home, they always had one guy who ran it, who was part of management, that was actually a veteran. They made sure at least one. You didn't have to be a veteran to work there, but at least one was always a veteran. And he was always a staff NCO. And for those who don't know what that is, that means he was in the military and he was an E6 or above. That's called a staff NCO. They didn't care what branch he was from, but he had to be an E6 or above. Why? Because all of the people would respect him because he was an E6 and above. And who would know that? Veterans know that. Like veterans would, if you're not a veteran, you don't know what I'm talking about. You're like, well,
Yep.
what does that mean? I don't know. But if you are a veteran, you get it. And they would often call this civilian by his rank that he had in the military. So they would call him, sergeant, or they'd call him gunny, or they'd call him top. They would call him the name, the rank that he had. He's a civilian. But what that meant is they were feeling that we were all together. It was a sign of respect, and they listened to him. So whenever there was a tough conversation to have, you get the E6 sailor to show up and do that. He does that.
Yep.
He has a tough conversation. And I remember when I was working for the Yellow Ribbon in Massachusetts, we were having a problem. People weren't showing up to the events. And I said, look, you got to show up to my training. I'm training people on how to, in this case, I was doing trainings on how to get people to get jobs, networking, resume building, stuff like that, to get jobs for transitioning, right? Transitioning from military. And most of these guys had just come back from Afghanistan back then, right? It's probably 10 years ago, maybe. All come back from Afghanistan. And I'm like, you have to order them to show up. And the person at the Yellow Room was like, we can't do that. We can't order them. I said, no, you don't say you have to. I'm like, no, that's mean. No. You need to, because they're all badasses. They just came back from Afghanistan. These are combat guys. They came back from Afghanistan combat. They were the soldiers. They were soldiers, combat soldiers coming back. They weren't Marines. I used to do with Marines a lot, but these guys were soldiers, right?
Sure.
So they're all combat guys, right? So they're all badasses. They don't want to act like they need help. You order them so they have an excuse to show up. So they go, yeah, I wasn't going to come here, but I got ordered, so I'll be here. And again, if you're not a vet, you don't get that.
Yep.
If you're a vet, you get that. You have to order them, not because you're being mean, so they can have an excuse to show up without saying, I don't need his help. I don't need any help, but I'm ordered, right? And they would do it. So the first sergeant there got it. He's like, Sharp, you're right. So he immediately orders his guys. Right? So, yeah, okay, got it. So he just does it. So again, that's the E6 and above I talked about that veterans respect. So he gives them the order, they'll show up. So anyway, I'm yapping away, but I'm going to the point that you really bring up. We look to government as expert when the experts are right there in our community and we ignore them.
Well, and I have a perfect example to this too. So one of the organizations we highlight in our community justice report is the Restorative Justice Mediation Program. Now, for the libertarians in the audience, this is one of the few community justice programs that receive zero government funding. So they are completely community funded. It's actually out of the Mennonite community there. And they focus primarily on juveniles. So there was an incident where that happens all across the country on a regular basis, where a group of juveniles get together and they vandalize something. And the justice system of the state's response, because all they know is stick.
Right.
The justice system's response would have been, well, you're punished for that, and here's your fines that you and your family are gonna have to pay, or it's a misdemeanor, or depending on
Or
how
jail.
far it go, or jail, right? You're gonna go to juvie. But they were diverted to this program. And what this program operates off of the principle of, particularly for juveniles, is that they don't really understand the consequences of their actions.
Right.
And if they don't understand the consequences of their actions, the state throwing some consequence at them is not going to do much besides make their parents broker.
Right,
So,
right, 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 right.
so what they did was they sat down the three juveniles who had participated. What they had done was they had vandalized a first grade class.
Okay.
Vandalized the classroom, broken the windows, and sprayed all over the place. So they sat down these three juveniles with the first graders who they had
Whoa.
vandalized their classroom and the teacher. And they had the first graders talk about how scared they were when they walked into class that day and they saw the glass all over the ground and how difficult
Wow.
that was from a first grader's perspective.
You're 6 years old. That's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
It
6.
is.
That's scary.
It is. And the teacher also talked about from her perspective, those kids then pretty much on their own just decided, well, we're going to clean it all up and we're going to fix the panels and we're going to do whatever it takes to make this right. And that's
Right.
why that program has a less than 7.5% recidivism rate.
Wow, that is amazing.
And the national recidivism rate for 1 year is 44%. And
That's what I'm saying. I
55% for
knew it was a whole
juveniles.
lot. Yes. Oh my God. That's a great story. Let me talk to my audience for a bit if I could, Dan. I have a super chat from the lunatic libertarian. Thank you for the 999. Larry, you're one of the hardest working libertarian. Keep working hard. Yeah, I'm gonna get tired though. So no, I'm kidding. Of course, I'm gonna keep working. I don't stop. It's crazy. I don't stop. You're right. But look, someone's got to do it. So I hope I can be part of the crew that is doing it. Thank you. I appreciate that. By the way, guys, if you do want to help out, you can. You can if you want to. If you happen to be watching on YouTube, Larry Shop YouTube, you can super chat me if you want to. But even if you don't, if you're watching on Twitter, and a lot of you watching on Twitter, just retweet this right now. If you retweet it, more people will see it. More people will hear these ideas, hear these stories. They'll be able to support us and support Dan too. Absolutely. If you just like it, click like. Every like button I get, every like counts. It gets me past the algorithms. I got to beat Al Gore, algorithm. I got to beat him. So come on. You click those like buttons, it does matter. But more importantly, Dan's here is giving us some good information. Dan is making a lot of good stuff happen in his world. Support him. Head over to instituteforcommunitysolutions.org. The details, I put it in the description in both Facebook and also YouTube. Plus, Dan, you're doing some event or something coming up here, aren't you? Please tell me about that.
Absolutely. So on October 10th, so next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to be having a virtual event, an introduction to community justice. If you're like most people and you're listening to this broadcast, you didn't even know that the community actually did any justice outside of the courts. The vast
Yep.
majority of people don't know that. But the last 2 years, we've been studying community solutions to justice. We have evaluated over 200 organizations throughout the country and looked at the data, and we've picked out 5 different solutions and 6 organizations that represent the best of community justice. And you're going to get to meet them tomorrow at 7 p.m. on Zoom. It's on our website, instituteforcommunitysolutions.org. Just type it in Google. They'll find us.
Is that
Institute for
tomorrow,
Community
you said?
Solutions. That is next Tuesday,
Oh, next
October
Tuesday.
10th. October 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern. You're going to get to hear from 6 organizations and how they're transforming justice in their community. And of course, get early access to the report, which goes into both the examples and the case studies of organizations and the academic research and backing. So, if you were to implement this in your community, it will work. And that's at instituteforcommunitysolutions.org.
There we go. Excellent. Sam says governments are great at promising money and writing checks. That's it. He's kind of right on that one, Dan.
But I'll push back on this. Government isn't even great at writing checks. And here's one of the problems when it comes to community solutions that they get trapped in is government tends to have a lot of money that they give out in grants to nonprofits. And what happens is because government is not in or a part of the community that they're trying to serve, they, in trying to prevent fraud, put restrictions on that money that actually
Oh.
harm the community that they're trying to serve. Here's an example. There is a women's domestic violence shelter in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Okay.
And don't remember the name off the top of my head, but I was interviewing the executive director, and they are 70% funded by state and federal grants. And so I
That's a
was
lot.
figuring, yeah, I was figuring that I talked to this guy, he's going to extol the virtues of government money because that's who's giving the money, right? And the first words out of his mouth are nonprofits should stop relying on state and federal grants.
Yes.
And I was just like, okay, you're going to have to explain that one a little bit. Talk more. And he said, they're majority funded by Department of Justice Violence Against Women Act grants.
Mm.
And those grants have several restrictions on them. One of the restrictions is that the money has to be used for women. It can't be used for pets. Now, if you're not
Can't be used for
familiar
pets.
for pets. Now, if you're
Oh,
not
I've
familiar,
heard this before. Oh,
yep.
yeah, I have a story. Keep going. I
If
got a story for you. Go ahead.
if you're not familiar with the problems with domestic violence, then that sounds like a perfectly reasonable restriction. Of course, it's the Violence Against Women Act. You want to protect the women, so you give the women the money, right? The problem with that is that no woman wants to leave her pet with the
Yep.
same guy who's been beating on her. And so
Yes.
this shelter would contact women who they knew needed help, and the women would refuse to go to the shelter because they couldn't bring their pets with them.
Yes.
And they eventually were able to get some really cool, private funding, and they were able to get that shelter built. But government's not even good at writing the checks because all
Yes.
they know is stick.
There is also there have been issues with women's shelters and also with homeless shelters. Same way, right? So now I've got a woman who is afraid. You're exactly right. Her husband is physically beating her. What's he gonna do to her dog? He's gonna kill her dog, and
Yeah.
she knows that. Not just that, the dog is probably one of the things that's keeping her sane. I'm not being facetious. I'm being real. The pet's probably keeping her sane in her horrible relationship. So she loves the dog more than she loves the husband. So she would
Yes.
literally rather defend the dog than herself. Like she probably loves the dog more than her husband. So you're
Yep.
right. They don't go homeless shelters. There have been people who literally have said, "Give your dog up." Like you'll go to the shelter, they'll give your dog up. You can't come in. Give your dog. Or worse, it happens with kids. We can't take the kids. Leave your kids. You're asking a mom to leave her kids and her pet. She would rather, it's going to sound horrible, she'd rather be beaten.
Oh, yes.
Like she'd
100%.
rather, I got to leave my kids. I'll take the beating. I'm not leaving my kids. That's a lot of moms would say that, and they do it. They go like, "Oh, fine, I'll take the beating. I'm not going to abandon my kids and my mom."
There
And the
was a
system
yeah,
destroys it. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, please go.
there was a woman where I live outside the Raleigh area who had been in a domestic violence situation, and she had lost her housing. She only had a car. And it was her and her kids living in the car. She's trying to figure out ways to make ends meet. Was eventually helped by a community organization. But before she was helped by this community organization, is Haven of Hope or Haven of Light or something like that locally. Before she was helped by them, she called who she thought would be helpful, which was the Department of Health and Human Services.
Sounds right.
And what did they do? What did they do, Larry? What do you think they did when she called them?
Call the cops.
They called CPS.
There we go. Yes,
They,
exactly. Yes.
they said, okay, well, thanks for letting us know you're living in your car. You have 7 days to fix that situation, or we're taking your kids.
Taking your kids. There we go. Yep.
All
Well,
they know
you
is
said
stick.
they're good with the stick. And they were on brand at least, Dan. They were on brand.
They
Totally
were
on
on
brand.
brand.
Totally on brand. Yes. Let me grab a couple more comments if I could. Missy says, "I didn't go to a women's shelter because I couldn't take my dog." Absolutely not. Yes, you're right. This is a thing, right? This is actually a thing. Jean says, "My dog saved me from being beaten by my first husband. After that, he would lock the dog in the basement and beat me. Oh my God. Exactly what I was talking about. The dog is saving your life here. Then I left him. My brother found me a safe place for me to stay with my baby." Point, community, family, right? Family. She couldn't go to the government. Thank you, Jean, for sharing that. I appreciate that wonderful story. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yes. I guess everyone's just going, "Dan, you're right." Is this like a head nod? Is that basically what it is?
It's heartrending too,
Yes.
because for a bureaucrat, that's one line in a 100-page government grant, and they don't see it.
Right.
And I don't necessarily fault them. They're trying in many cases to do the best they can. I know that's at odds with some libertarians believe, but I think, especially given the number of libertarian meetings I've been to, where half of them are employees of the state in the first place,
Yes.
they are
Yes.
trying. They are trying, but they just don't know the people. They don't know the people. They're not there, and community is. And imagine what would happen if, instead of arguing about what government program we were going to implement, the first thought was, maybe the third thought could be government. The first thought was, what can we do as a community to address this problem?
Yes.
I was talking with the Longmont Community Justice Project on a podcast. We have a podcast, by the way. How do we solve it? Where we go around and we find organizations that have the data to prove they're making an
Hold on. The
impact.
name of the podcast is How Do We Solve It?
How do we solve it?
Oh, I
Yes.
like that podcast. How do I find that podcast?
Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever podcasts are sold.
There we go. I like that. There we go.
You can
Good,
find
good, good, good.
you can find How Do We Solve It, where we
Okay.
release series. So our community justice series is going to be coming out first. But I was talking to the director of LCJP, and they're a community organization that does diversions for both youth and adults. So if you have a misdemeanor, even some light felonies, and both people don't want their to go through the state, they can go through LCJP instead. And they got
Oh.
trackers. 95% of their contracts are completed. It's an amazing program, really low recidivism rates, things like that. And we were talking about, well, how would you implement a similar program like this in your community?
Sure.
And the advice she had was, you have to have a community organization do it, because
Oh.
nobody trusts the justice system to be neutral. So if
Wow.
If you-
That's like supposed to be the opposite.
Mhm. But nobody trusts the justice system to be neutral. So if you create it as a department of the stick people, you're gonna get sticks. I know I'm running this analogy as hard as I can.
I love it. Keep it going. It's so good. I love
But
it.
if you instead create it as an independent organization, where you've got both justice involved people who have been through the justice system and wouldn't trust it, as far as they could throw it, and you have police officers who are coming from the other side of the equation, and you have them sit down together in the same room at that independent organization, that creates trust. That creates a neutral ground. That's another reason, to just this area, it's another reason why, if you're sitting down at a city council or a county commission, they have town hall meetings all the time, right?
Sure.
For town hall, we'll bring all the citizens together to talk about what government is going to do to fix the problem. Well, imagine if, when you're having those town halls, you talk about, well, what can community do to fix the problem? Maybe there's a stick element to this that we have to have government involved in.
Maybe.
But
Sure.
if people are primarily in need of care, and they're primarily in need of compassion, and they're primarily in need of service, then so much more good could be done by going through the community. And I'm rambling a little bit here, but I want to
But
give an
the
example.
point I want to bring up here is, though, that I like is, what usually happens is government takes the lead and community kind of has a bit here or there. You're saying the opposite. Community takes the lead, and when they see a need for a stick, they go, okay, government, come in. You're good at that. We need a stick now. So come here, and here's a stick, right? So you're turning it on its head. You're changing who's leading the entire thing. The community's leading and not the government.
Yes. And an example of this is actually Austin, Texas. So in Austin, Texas, they have a homelessness problem just like California does. But instead of tackling that homeless problem by creating a city agency, Department of Homelessness, and going out and tackling this problem, what they did was the Austin Community Foundation took the lead, and they started offering vouchers to rental companies when veterans would get behind on their rent. And the reason why it worked instead of going through a government department is the Austin mayor is like, and he was sitting on the board of the community foundation, so he was kind of able to direct things. The Austin mayor was like, he was actually on Joe Rogan talking about this. He was saying, look, if we had gone to the private landlords and we had said the government is going to do this program, they would have all laughed at us because they would be like, yeah, we'll get the vouchers in 2035. But
Right.
because community took the lead, government learned when people were being kicked out. They learned when there was an eviction issue, but community took the lead. All the money went through the community foundation. They raised tons and tons of private money for this, and the government kind of provided information about what was going on. They were able to tackle veteran homelessness quickly and really
Yeah.
just keep veterans from ending up on the street because they let community take the lead, because community actually knows what it's doing. And then government came in with the information, with
Right.
support, with officiality, so that you guys can go anywhere you need to go. But
Right.
community took the lead, and that actually worked, unlike Seattle's homeless program, which has spent countless millions and still has giant homeless settlements and has
Right.
lots of problems with homelessness because the government was asked to take the lead, not community. And all they have is one size fits none solutions for everything that just don't work at the end of the day.
One size fits none. I like that. Not one size fits all. One size fits none. I love this. Let me grab some more of these comments. Jean is back up. Jean says, wow, this man really understands. I think she likes you, Dan. And then
Thank
she
you,
says,
Jean.
what a fantastic idea. You're winning. You are slowly winning my audience over. That's good. Missy was good. Missy has posted for you guys, if you want to, in the YouTube chat. It's right there. How Do We Solve It podcast on Apple. If you care, head over to YouTube. She has posted it there. If you want to check out that, it's already there for you if you would like. The lunatic libertarian asked an important question. He says, who sets the criteria to receive services? Because the government explicitly sets ridiculous requirements for services. I think this is a valid piece, right? How do we know who should be serviced, right?
Mhm.
And how? And government usually will have some kind of rubric with a bunch of check boxes or whatever. And do you do that? Boom. Doesn't community have to do the same thing or no?
The answer is essentially spontaneous order. And libertarians are going to like this. The problem with government requirements, and you're right, they sometimes have very ridiculous requirements. One example would be for the USDA school lunch program. They require, because the government has giant stockpiles of dairy, they require the kids to have milk with every meal, every single meal. And so what ends up happening in a lot of places where they serve this after school lunch program is they dump out gallons and gallons and gallons and gallons of milk because the kids don't actually want it, or the adults don't want it if they're getting it at that point. And so the government is trying to set these requirements with a lack of information. But what makes community different is at the end of the day, I have to go to my donors and I have to prove to them that we are making the impact they want.
Right.
And yes, that is not always, maybe some donors have individual reasons for that, and they like modify nonprofits and corrupt them, things like that. That happens in every industry. A little bit less so in nonprofits in a lot of ways. But I have to go back to them and I have to say it was worth helping this person. It was worth
Right.
helping that person. It was worth helping that person. And so most nonprofits don't have a long list of requirements. They treat each case as an individual,
Right.
unless they're government funded. Unless they're government funded, because
Yes.
the government grants will require them to have that list of requirements. That's why some nonprofits, including Solutions for Change out of San Diego, they actually returned a government grant, $110,000 government grant to HUD, because it would have required them to change their program to housing first instead of addressing drug and alcohol issues.
Got
And
it.
so government, if your nonprofit has strict requirements, like if you go to a food bank and they ask for your ID and all income information and all that, the odds are very strong that they are heavily government funded.
Got it.
But
Makes
for
sense.
those nonprofits that are not, their goal is impact. So they're going to help the people who they think they're going to make the most impact with. And you're going to sit down with a case officer at that nonprofit and you're going to be like, hey, I just came off of, just made this extra money. I know you're giving me a basic income. There are some nonprofits that are doing that. And you're giving me a basic income. I have just, found this job, but I'm going to need like 90 days to move my kids into the apartment and get everything set. Can I receive the basic income for another 90 days? And in most cases, they will do it. If you have that same conversation with your welfare officer, that's called the welfare cliff. And it's not going to happen.
Correct.
That at the end of the day, if we actually care about these people and not just care about looking like we care about these people.
Right.
At the end of the day, we have to be able to take their individual circumstances into account. And
Got it.
government can't, it just physically cannot do
Can't
that.
do
It's
it.
not close
It
enough.
can't. I agree.
That's why city
100%.
government programs are a little bit better than the federal ones because they at least understand the culture of their city. But it's
Right.
simply not close enough. And it doesn't have the mechanism where the board of the government can go, you're spending money wrong. I'm not going to give you any more money. The taxpayers can't just go, I'm just not
Right.
going to give you this money then.
Right.
Like you
Exactly.
clearly suck at spending it, so I'm not going to give it to you.
You get the stick when you do that.
You get you get a very big stick when you do
Yes,
that.
you get the stick when you do that. Yes,
Government
absolutely.
hauls out their
Yes.
biggest stick.
100%. Let me talk to my audience again real fast if I could. Guys, if you're liking this show, then do me a favor, hit the like button. I'm bugging you to hit the like button. Why? Because I'm bored? No, because the like button matters. Click the like button if you can. It does matter. Please do so. If you're watching on Twitter right now, retweet this. Let your friends see this. Let your family see this. It does matter completely. If you want to support the show directly, you can. You can super chat me on YouTube if you want to. You can go over to Patreon if you want to. Patreon.com/sharpway. Throw me $10 a month so I can keep doing this. I'll spend more time doing this and less time doing the other dumb things that I do. If you want to support my actual attempt at getting a independent party on the ballot, you may. LarrySharp.com/ballot access be the way to do that. Throw all your money at me for that. That matters tremendously. But more importantly, Dan is sitting here giving us some very good stories and good info. Support him over at instituteforcommunitysolutions.org. And he is actually having an event coming up here. Please tell us about this event again.
Absolutely. So we'll start with, if you have any money left after you support Larry with his ballot access fundraiser, we have a really unique donor program called the Solution Circle. And what the Solution Circle does is it really funds our work, particularly with the How Do We Solve It podcast. We figured out what is the best way that we can identify and evaluate these community solutions. And yes, we're releasing a 140-page research paper on community solutions to justice, but that took 2 years and a lot of time. So we're slimming down the process and we're focusing on the podcast. This podcast costs us about $752,000 to produce every month. It is a video podcast. It is an audio podcast. It is designed to reach as many people as possible. If you can go to the Solution Circle and you can become a $20 a month, $25 a month, $30 a month, $10 a month member of the Solution Circle, then what you're doing is every single day, your dollars are helping make sure that another solution is uncovered. And maybe a county commissioner is listening to this show right now and they hear that solution and they're like, wow, what could that do in my community? What if we put community first in my community? And the impact that's why we call it 10 times your impact. The impact you can make with those dollars is incredible. So if you're interested in this and you're interested in supporting the work, please go to the Solution Circle at instituteforcommunitysolutions.org. And if you're interested in our upcoming report, the first ever report on community solutions to justice in the history of the United States, we will be interviewing the 6 organizations we highlighted doing incredible work next Tuesday, October 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's on Zoom. The registration link is on the website. Hope to see you guys all there.
There we go. I love that. So I appreciate that. Dave has a comment. He says, could it be that leaders of the bureaucracy don't actually want to help people because that might solve the problem and therefore reduce the size of the bureaucracy and put bureaucrats out of work? You know, I got to tell you, I don't think most people, when they join government, think that at all. My gut, and this is how I've done a lot of training with state agencies, city agencies. My day job, I do a lot of training with them. And I think most of them join for one or two reasons. One is, oh, good government job. That's why. Good government job, you get benefits, right? Good job. They don't care if it's government out there. So, oh, good job. I'm happy to have this job. Good benefits, union. I'm good. That's option one. Option two, they actually want to make a difference. Like they want to be a public servant. I think those are the two reasons why most people join. Now, to your point, he says the leaders. I think Dave's right. I think many of them become very jaded. I think as they get in the system more and more, I think they are jaded. I think part of what Dave said is correct. I don't know. You deal with them. What do you think?
Simon Sinek has a concept called moral fading that he says in any company or in any organization, in any culture, where people are demanded to achieve results that are impossible to achieve in the current timeline, you have something appear called moral fading, where people start to make trade-offs on their morals and on their values so that they can get the stuff done on time.
Yep.
They can get the stuff done. And people start to make trade-offs of how they live their life if this happens long enough. And so when it comes to the leaders, I think the leaders have made too many trade-offs.
Mm.
They're in charge of a stick that is trying to be a helper, that is
Yep.
trying to do service. And by the time they get in charge of that, they have made so many trade-offs to get to that point of power that even if they had really good, and not everybody has really good intentions. And
Sure.
in a lot of industries, not everybody has really good intentions. Just in government, you don't get punished for having bad intentions
That's
and
true.
bad
Yes.
results. You get promoted. So,
Right.
they're the worst actors get protected there. But by that point, they become leaders. I think they've made so many trade-offs. But we can't possibly do this. So I got to make this person happy and this corporation happy. So we'll change the regulations so that maybe and they keep holding this moral value of someday I will be able to be in a position of enough power to do good. And by that point, they've done enough damage that they don't really have any leg to stand on. There's a C.S.
Right.
Lewis quote that says, "I don't fear the robber baron, because the robber baron must sleep." And I think he uses the word cupidity. Their cupidity at some point is satiated. But those who torture us for our own benefit never
Mm.
stop because they are guided by the righteousness of their own cause. It's so true.
Wow. Yes.
And I think
Absolutely.
that is what describes that.
Well, there we go. So we should spend much more time with community than anything else. So let me ask you, Dan, before we wrap this up, anything I missed? Anything we want to talk about? Something I might have not brought up?
No, honestly, this has been a fantastic conversation. And if your listeners take anything away from this conversation, it is that there are not two sectors. It's not a public sector and a private sector. There's a community sector. And that if we can lean into that community sector, and if we can talk about that community sector, and if we can find local nonprofits and bring them onto our shows, every libertarian is a podcast. How many local nonprofits have you interviewed on your libertarian podcast?
A lot.
Not you, but the
Yes.
general, not
Yep.
much usually. And if we can bring community into the spotlight, then the voluntary society that libertarians are seeking can finally have the third piece it needs. The piece that everybody says, well, the market doesn't have that, the market doesn't have that. It doesn't, but the community does. And so
Yeah.
if libertarianism becomes more about the market and the community, everything voluntary, as opposed to the market versus the government, that will change a lot of things.
I love that. That's amazing. Guys, I want to say thank you so much for watching this evening. I appreciate it. I am off for like 4 days, spending time with my family, so I'll be off for several days, but I'll be back Monday night again. Until then, I will see you all